Alright. I think this is going to be my first video that I'm going to be putting up on the channel. I'm mainly making this to kind of help out, I suppose, deck building for specific decks in the current format for the Pokemon TCG. Just kind of help out people, I guess in the Ottawa region, but also in general. Kind of go over certain deck profiles and kind of explain what decisions and what decisions I've made personally, and also what are things and what are certain cards and what are certain decisions that you can make and what you can include in certain variations of a specific deck that you want to play. So I guess my first deck that I'm going to be starting out with is one that I've extensively tested in this format, which is Dragapult Dusknoir. I'll be going over what cards I've included in my list and what cards you could potentially add or potentially change. So I'll start off with going over, the Pokemon in this deck, and I'll go over some of its matchups as well, and I'll go over its power level, what it can do, and what are certain lines that you can take in certain matchups. But I think first off, I'll start off with just going over what the list itself looks like, and then we'll move on from there. So, in terms of the Pokemon, I would say that there is a decent amount of Pokemon in here. I would say about kind of the same amount as a straight Pult list where you're not playing any Dusknoirs. But to start off, we're running 2 copies of Bidoof. Main reason being, why aren't we running one, is just because it's a great starter in a lot of matchups. It has the ability to item lock your opponent, but also you want to start it a lot of the time, so one copy may not be enough. But also, if you prize a copy, just because of how powerful this card is and the number of matchups in which you need it, it's really important to run a second copy. I know there's some lists out there like Dragapult Blaziken that opt to run one copy because they're a deck that prefers to go first, but in certain matchups they'd like to opt to go second, and they want to still have that item locking capability, so they only run one. But definitely in this deck you need to run 2 because of just how important this card is. Next is what you're probably very familiar with. The deck runs 4 Dreepies. It's just super important to kind of have this in your hand early and use your Body Poffins to search out this Pokemon, since it's 70 HP or less. In this case, obviously, it's 70 HP, as you can see. But you run 4 copies of Dreepy because the deck attacks with Dragapult, and you need to evolve into it out of Dreepy. And you want to run the maximum amount of this card as you possibly can, which is 4 copies. Probably not surprised, but you also run Forge or Cloak. Reason being is because in a lot of matchups you get item locked. You want to find this card as much as possible. And also it's just so important because of your recon directive ability to kind of just draw cards and get your deck going. Also, the second stage 1 in the evolution line for Dragapult, so we need a bunch of Dracloaks as well, so we're playing a 4/4 line there. And then 2 Dragapult EX, which is your attacker. So essentially, the reason some people say that playing 3 is correct, some people play 2 and then they play a heavier recovery count to get the Dragapult EXs back more frequently. I always say I'm a little greedy, so I, play 2 copies only. In my testing, it has been, good enough. You can get away with playing 2. And some people may, caution me against playing 2, and I'll explain why later because of the ball search counts. But I haven't ran into any issues playing 2. And the old variations of Dragapult Dusknoir also ran 2, sometimes 3 for the most part, so I think you can get away with 2. 3 is probably safer, but this is one of those things where I would say it's up to you, the user of the deck, to decide what card you would like to cut in order to include the third Dragapult EX. Next up, we got the Dusknoir line, and I'll explain kind of why it looks the way it does. So I run 2 Duskull, which is just the basic that you need in the Dusknoir line. And then I run a one Dusclops and one Dusknoir, so a 2-1-1 line. Why do I not run the second Dusclops? Space in the deck being one of the reasons, because there are some other cards that I find very important that I like to run, but also because this deck runs rare candies. So if you prize the Dusclops, it's not the end of the world. You have access to Dusknoir and using its ability Curse Blast to put 13 damage counters on your opponent's Pokemon by using rare candy to evolve up into it. So Dusclops is very important, I'll admit, like especially against Bidoof decks, etc. Evo decks, it's like super important. Even stage 2 decks, a lot of the time, it can come in really handy. But I don't feel the need, and I haven't felt too stressed to need to include a second copy. Also because like if you do prize this line at times, the deck still functions very well as just a Dragapult deck. I just like to have the power of being able to kind of manipulate prizes and pressure Pokemon with the Curse Blast abilities on both the Dusknoir and the Dusclops. So 2-on-1 line there. This is where, you know, it gets a little interesting. I run 2 Munkidori. I don't run 1. I've seen a lot of lists run 1, but the 2 Munkidori is incredibly important, specifically into the Dragapult mirror matches that you're going to be playing, amongst other matchups, like maybe if you hit like Grimmsnarl, which can be pretty niche, or like spread decks, like if you hit Starmie or anything like that. And it really depends what your local meta looks like. But 2 Munkidoris is just so important, because the reason is like, you know, you're not always benching 2. It's not like you're playing 2 because you're not playing 2 because you want to like bench both, but you're playing 2 because you need to find this copy. You need to find the copy of the Munkidori very frequently, especially in the Bidoof matchups. You want to bench this thing immediately, and you want to try to get a Dark Energy to it as soon as possible. So you'll see later on that we're playing 2 Dark Energies to go alongside it. But if you prize 1 copy, you can get screwed over in the Bidoof War, which is like the battle of the item lock, essentially you versus your opposing Bidoof opponent, who's essentially trying to item lock you and keep you item locked while also trying to get rid of the Bidoof that you are using to item lock them, so that they gain access to the items while you remain item locked, preventing you from using cards like Unfair Stamped to disrupt them and slow them down to gain like an advantage. So that's why there's a reason why two copies of the Munkidori are used. I'm gonna get to the very niche cards in this list that can be replaced, or not cards, rather cards specifically. So we have Maractus, and Maractus is a card. It is very niche. Like I would say that it is one of the most cuttable cards in this deck. But I personally find very niche lines, and I use Maractus very frequently as a win con where certain people might not expect it. I would say that Retreat Lock is very disrespected in the current format, but I've been trying to like tell people to tailor their lists in a way to kind of prevent themselves from losing to Retreat Lock outright, maybe playing a way to play around Retreat Lock. Essentially what Maractus's attack does, I'm trying to get this to zoom, probably can't be read, but it says corner and you do 20 damage and your opponent's active Pokemon cannot retreat. The way you're supposed to use this is you're supposed to use this on like evolution lines that can no longer evolve, as well as Pokemon that are basics that can't evolve, because I'm not sure if everyone knows this, but if you're watching this and you don't know this, if you were to retreat lock a Pokemon and if it were to evolve, it is no longer considered to be the Pokemon that it was previously. And so the text reads that the active Pokemon is retreat locked, but that active Pokemon is no longer that version of itself that it was there previously, and so the new evolution line can retreat. So you got to be really careful when you're retreat locking, Pokemon, because they can get out of retreat lock depending on what Pokemon it is that you are locking in the active spot. So Pokemon like, and I'll show in a second, like Latias, Pheasantipede, and Meowth are super vulnerable Pokemon to the corner attacks. Basically, you're able to, in certain matchups, like the value gain out of Maractus is that if they have one of these Pokemon that they need in order to set up their board, they put down a Latias, a Pheasantipede, or a Meowth, you're able to corner lock it in the active and set up your board essentially to get the optimal board that you want in order to win certain matchups, in order to kind of gain back a tempo or two. And what I mean by that is essentially you want to gain a turn or two to kind of rebuild what it is that you're looking to build, get the cards that you're looking to get, to piece together a kind of like multi-prize mapping, or essentially just outright win the game. I would say that if you're not playing Dusknoirs, or if you're playing a variation that plays Briar, I personally think that a card like Maractus is super strong, because a lot of the time your opponent is not going to be giving you a Pokemon in the active that you can Briar. And that means that you're going to need to bring something into the active that can be Briared, but you can't play two supporters in one turn. You cannot play a Boss's Orders and a Briar in the same turn. So when I was testing Briar in Dragapult lists, I found that Maractus was really helpful, because when my opponent went down to 2 prizes, I would go Boss with Maractus and trap a Latias, a Meowth, a Fez, any other Pokemon that can be trapped. That's, you know, a 2-prizer in in some scenarios. And if I had 3 prizes or 4 prizes remaining, I would try to piece together a play where I could Briar the active for 3 and then take a prize on the bench, you know. And I'll get to ways that you can do that, you know, in a little bit. But that's the main use case for Maractus. Once again, it can be cut. You know, you can cut it for a card like Blood Moon, so you get late game agency in a way where you can use Boss attached to Blood Moon Knockout instead of having to set up a Dragapult from scratch and get 2 energies on it once it's been knocked out. But that's just the main use case for Maractus, is basically to allow yourself to get into win-con situations that you wouldn't otherwise have been able to win. 1 copy of Latias, because I want to be able to, like, you know, get energy tempos, which just means that you're able to attach an energy per turn and keep up that tempo throughout the entire match. So you don't fall behind energy attachments, but also because starting Maractus is a 2 energy retreat cost. So when you are going for turns where you are retreat locking your opponent's active Pokemon, you're going to want to be able to quickly pivot the Maractus and not have to attach another energy to it to manually retreat it. So it pairs really well, the Latias. Also, like, it helps you retreat basically any basic Pokemon that they gust up. Also, if you start Pokemon like Dreepian, you can like Ultra Ball for Latias, or if you start Latias, you can easily just pivot out of the Latias into a Badoo and also get your energy attachment for turn onto a Dreepy or a Monkey Dory, depending on what matchup you're hitting. So that's the main use for this. Fez is just a staple. It's just to help you draw more cards in a situation where you get disrupted or where you need more cards after they've knocked out a Badoo. So Badoo and Fez pair really well together because Badoos get knocked out really easily, and then you Fez to like replenish your hand, and then you try to item lock them again if that's the case, or you can start attacking, but that's what the main use case for Fez is. And Meowth is just a really good way to find some of your one-of supporters like Rosa's, Petrol, that I play in this list, and I'll get into that in a second, but that's just what the main purpose for Meowth is. Meowth for boss is also very, very strong. I feel like if you were to test out your games with Dragapult and stuff like that, you'll notice how frequently you use Meowth for boss to get game. I also like the Meowth for boss line really well, I mean to say that I like it a lot when you play Blood Moon in the list, because oftentimes you may either have the energy that you need to attach to Blood Moon but not the boss, but you may have a way to search out a Pokemon like Meowth, or you'll not even need the energy because it'll be at 1 prize and all you really need is just the Meowth for the boss. So having an Ultra Ball in the late games is really important. Or even if this is already in the discard in the early game, you can like Night Stretcher for it, which is pretty cool too. Next up, we'll get into the supporters that we play in this list. So I'm just going to grab the supporters over here. So we play 4 copies of Lily's Determination because you want to be able to just draw as many cards as possible in the early game. And you need the best draw supporter in the current format is Lily's Determination. So, that's just the main reason why you want to play as many copies of this card as possibly, which is 4. I don't think there's much explanation needed behind Lily's Determination. If you play the TCG, you'll understand why 4 copies are played. If not, feel free to ask questions and I'll try to answer as many of them as possible. 3 boss. Some lists play 2, some lists play 4. Depends if you're playing a straight Dragapult list or a Dusknoir Dragapult list. I think you can get away with with 3. Like, you can get away with 2. It's just very greedy in my opinion. But I'm greedy in other aspects with this list. So like, it really depends on where you want to kind of cards. Like, where do you want to be greedy? Do you want to be greedy in your supporters and your ability to gust, or do you want to be greedy in your Pokemon search? Do you want to be greedy in your Pokemon lines to make more space for other trainers? Like, where is it that you're making cuts? I don't think there's any specific one variation of this deck that's good. I think that this deck can be played many different ways. But personally, I play 3 copies of Boss's Orders, and I think that I'm enjoying these 3 copies. And I think if you're playing a card like Maractus, and a lot of times you're comboing Gust with Maractus, that you want to be playing a higher count of boss. Like, you don't want to be playing 2. Like 2 I don't think is enough. So that's the main reason why I play 3 copies. And I've been comfortable with it. I like it. So that's that for the Gust. I play 2 copies of Crispin. Mainly because it's really good at finding your dark energies to attach to your monkeys, but also can power up your Dragapults in 1 turn. Basically, you can just like Crispin Psychic Fire to Dragapult. It can also help power up different attackers in very like niche matchups, such as like powering up Dusknoir, powering up like Latias, Fez, etc. Really depends on what matchup you hit, but it's like a very like strong card to have in this deck, where we're no longer playing a spec like Sparkling Crystal or Neo Upper Energy. Like, you just kind of want to get like energies onto a Dragapult and attack. Sometimes when you have like a really good board where you have like multiple Dracloak, you don't even need to use Lily, you know? So why not use Crispin instead? You know, just like start powering up energies, like start getting energies onto your Dracloaks and try to get ahead in the energy attachments, so that you don't need to use a card like Crispin in the late game, and instead you can use cards like Boss to kind of, or like cards like Petrol to like get you what you need to like combo pieces to win the game. Next card in the supporter list is Rosa's. I originally stated that this card was terrible. I regret that statement, and I'll say that some people do think this card is unnecessary in the deck, but the reason I'm just so obsessed with this card as a supporter, and I think that it's like very much needed, is because you go behind frequently by sacking Badoos, and you can sack energies with Ultra Ball and gain value out of it through this card. And because you play Meowth, you can also find this one of supporter. That's why I believe this card is useful. Now, what it does is that it accelerates 2 cards from your discard to any of your stage 2 Pokemon. 2 basic energy cards, let's just specify. And they don't have to be different energy. They can be the same energy. And I'll explain why this is important in certain matchups. But what's so good about Rosa's is that you can actually get a 3rd energy attachment in your turn. Unlike Crispin, where you would search your deck for 2 basic energy, accelerate one of them to one of your Pokemon, and then put the other in hand, and the one that goes to hand gets to be your attachment for turn, usually. What's so good about Roses is that you can get 2 out of the discard, accelerate them to a Pokemon that's a stage 2, and then also attach a 3rd energy for turn. Now, the way that you're supposed to use it in a lot of scenarios is you're supposed to Roses, a Psychic, and a Fire to your Dragapult, and then attach a Dark to your Monkey Dory for turn. Another scenario that comes up very often that's very useful for a card like this is accelerating 2 Psychic energies from your discard, or a Psychic and a Fire, to a Dusknoir, a Dusclops, or a Duskull. And then use like a rare candy to evolve into the Dusknoir, to use Dusknoir's attack Shadowbind to retreat lock a certain Pokemon. So Shadowbind does 150 damage. I'll just show you the card in just a second here. I mean, we've discussed this card, but Shadowbind does 150 damage, and the opponent's next turn, the defending Pokemon can't retreat. So essentially, it's a very, very powerful retreat locking attack, to the point where it makes a big difference in certain matchups. Cards like Fez that have 210 HP, 2 Prizer, you can go retreat lock them, do 150, and on the following turn, you can either pop your Dusknoir, or you can retreat your Dusknoir into a Dragapult, boss around the Fezandipiti that's in the active, and Phantom Dive and put 60 on the Fezandipiti that has 150 damage on it to take a knockout on the Fezandipiti and whatever you bring in the active. So Rose's Encouragement is more powerful than I think a lot of people give it credit for, and I also think that I underestimated that card when I first tested this deck. Lastly, this is a card that I don't know why it isn't played in decks like Pult Noir and Straight Pult and Dragapult Blaziken. This card is just like so powerful, and I think that people, if they were to test this more, would realize just how strong this card is. When you're playing a card like Unfair Stamp, this card gives you the opportunity to find it when you need it. And the reason why I think this card is stronger than people give it credit for is because you play Meowth. And so Ultra Ball becomes an out to finding Unfair Stamp, because you're able to Ultra Ball for Meowth, Meowth for Petrol, and grab Stamp off of Petrol. So you have more outs than you think to finding this one-of supporter, and this one-of supporter basically finds you anything that is an energy or Pokemon. I mean, the funny thing is it can find you energy at times, because Petrol can find you Night Stretcher, and Night Stretcher will find you an energy if there's one in the discard. That's why Petrol is so strong. Petrol can find you your stadiums. Petrol can find you Unfair Stand. Petrol can find you candy, help you do combos that you may not be able to do. You may not be able to guarantee specific cards that are being drawn off of lilies, and therefore Petrol will get you that one piece that you're looking for. Instead of just using lilies and praying to draw into the card you need, you can actually use Petrol to just get whatever trainer it is that you're looking for in the specific scenario that you find yourself in. So I would say to a lot of people, include Petrol in your list. You'll like it more than you think, in my opinion. And if you don't, just cut it. It's really not a deal breaker, but in my opinion it is. I'll try to speed this up because this is kind of getting pretty long in terms of going over the deck list itself, but we got 4 copies of Buddy Poppin just to find our Duskulls, Badoos, Dreepies. I think that's about it. So main reasons why we run the Poffins. I play 3 Ultra Ball, and this is Hyperbole, it's in French actually, but it's just an Ultra Ball. You can run 4. You probably should run 4, especially if you're playing 2 Dragapult. You probably should run 4. This is very greedy from me, but it's because I'm fitting a bunch of other cards that, can be cut to, add the 4th Ultra Ball. But I play 3. And once again, I've played a lot of games with this list, and I've never really been in a situation where I'm like, oh my god, I can't believe I didn't have that 4th Ultra Ball. It hasn't really come up. There are scenarios where I'm like, oh, it would have been nice to have this Ultra Ball in hand, but it's never really been the biggest deal breaker for me. And one of the other reasons why 4th Ultra Ball should probably be played in a list like this is because an extra Ultra Ball is an extra out to your Meowth, which is an extra out to Petrol, which is an extra out to Unfair Stamp. So Ultra Ball is a super important card. I would probably run 4. I might actually make a change sometime soon to add in a 4th Ultra Ball, but I currently run 3 and it works. It works, I'll tell you that much. Next up we have the Pokepads. Once again, you can run 4 of these. It might be criminal to run 3 just because Pokepads are outs to any of your Pokemon that aren't EXs. So Monkey Dories, super important to find off Pokepad. Dusclops, Dusknoir, Dracloak, all your evolution lines that you don't want to Ultra Ball for because it can be pretty expensive getting rid of cards to discard in order to acquire an evolution Pokemon. That's why I know why lists run 4-4-4. I'm telling you right now that there is a reason why maximum consistency is super important. Why a lot of people are opting to play straight Pult or Pult Blaziken because they're playing 4 of both Poffin, Ultra Ball, and Pokepad. But I've been able to get away with 3, and I find it 3 has been enough for me personally. I feel comfortable with it. I don't feel any issues with the consistency of my deck. A lot of the time the consistency is still fine in my opinion. You can always get more consistency though. There are always tech cards that you can cut to make space for consistency, and I guess that's kind of my point. And next up we got the 2 candies. Just helps you get into your Dusknoir, helps you get into your Dragapult when you only have a Dreepy on board, helps you get aggressive in certain situations. It also means you don't just lose when they get rid of your Dracloaks and you have a Dreepy left on your bench. So 2 candies is really good. 1 candy is really inconsistent. 3 candy is a little unnecessary in my opinion because you don't want to open it too often. You don't want to see these cards in the early game. You want to see them in the mid to late game, or I would say primarily in the mid game to make aggressive plays happen. That's why I think 2 copies has been just right. It's just perfect. I don't think you need any more than 2 copies in a list like this. And I also do believe that when you're playing a separate stage 2 line, like in this case the Dusknoir, that you should be playing at least a couple copies of Rare Candy the same way that Dragapult Blaziken plays multiple copies of Rare Candy in order to get their Blaziken lineup. So it's like pretty similar concept in that, in that regards. 2 Night Stretcher. Once again, unbelievable levels of greed going on right now in this list because you're only playing 2 Dragapult EX. There is a high likelihood that you might have to Ultra Ball a certain Pokemon away that you need in the early game. And so if you prize a Night Stretcher in a lot of matchups and you only have 1 Night Stretcher in your deck, it can be very bad. Like, you're playing 2 Dragapult, you might want to be playing 3 Night Stretcher because you want to find ways to recover that card more frequently. Also, because Dusknoirs essentially knock themselves out and go to the discard, you need to be able to recover those Dusknoir pieces, Dusclops or Duskulls, more frequently to set them up again to get more strength and agency in certain matchups. So you might also need to play a 3rd Night Stretcher, but once again, I haven't had any issues with 2. You can get away with 2, but I'm telling you why a 3rd one is very attractive in lists like these. This card is probably one of the unnecessary cards you might not need. Personally, I don't want to lose to any retreat lock shenanigans myself, because a lot of matchups I do bench Pokemon that are very susceptible to getting retreat locked. Also, I don't think I mentioned this, but when you're having a really slow start against Dragapult decks, one of the most important uses of Maractus is you can just go Maractus something that's a basic that can't get evolved, like a Fez Latios or a Meowth that they played early game to set up their board if they didn't have a good supporter. You just Maractus lock that thing, and you gain access to items all of a sudden. You gain access to items because you're no longer getting Badoo locked in the early game. And so that's one of the main uses for Maractus, but I would say that Switch is very much an optional card. Like, I play this because I don't want to get Yveltal locked, I don't want to get Maractus locked, I don't want to get Sob locked. I want to have an out to that in certain situations, and Petrol finds me the Switch. So Meowth, once again, becomes an out. And I'll explain why the Switch is so important. I'll explain in a second. I'll get back to the Switch. I'll put the Switch aside for a second. Unfair Stamp, standard A-Spec in this list. Most Dragapult lists, I believe, are almost all playing Unfair Stamp. You just want to be able to disrupt your opponent. Now, people might say that if you're playing Unfair Stamp, why not play Judge alongside it, in case that they draw out of the Unfair Stamp and they start playing the game again and your disruption fails. My opinion is that if you fail your Unfair Stamp, it doesn't quite do its job, you can still win the game, but also don't continue to go for that kind of a line, in the sense that you shouldn't just fully focus on disrupting your opponent. Like, they draw out of it. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. Don't fully rely on this game plan to win your games. Try to use it to gain the most advantage you can, but then having to play a judge later on feels so weak. Like, oh, I'm gonna judge you now and hope you don't draw out of the 4 cards, and then the 5th card when you draw for turn. Like, I just hope that doesn't work. It's like, if you've already relied on this and it doesn't work, there's no need to play judge as well. I think that some people will disagree and say, no, you do need it, because sometimes they'll have game in hand. They can go, I don't know, Petrol for like a card that will allow them to get game, and if you can't like disrupt them, or if you can't do something about what's going on in their hand, then you probably lose. And I say, just lose it. Like, it's okay. Like, if especially in a best of 3 scenario, it's fine. Like, this card should do what it should do in best of 3 scenarios. I would say maybe in a best of, you're playing like a tournament that's like best of 1 only, or like a challenge or something, then fair enough, run a judge. That makes sense. But I haven't felt the need to play a judge. Risky Ruins, 2 copies. Unbelievably important card. Unbelievably important. Specifically in the mirror, once again, mirror, like any Pult matchups, any deck that runs Badoo, being able to put down a Risky Ruins, bench a Pokemon like Monkey Dory, Dreepy, Duskull, anything like that to accrue damage on it, and then using your Monkey Dory and your Dark to move 2 damage counters to a Badoo, and then using your own Ishipollen to take a knockout on a Badoo is so important. It is such a key component into winning matches in the mirror match that I just can't describe to you how important this card is. It also allows you in a lot of matchups to pressure 70 HP, 80 HP Pokemon that are sitting on the bench. So it generates damage on your own bench, which will allow you to move it over using the Monkey Dory, and then you can use the Phantom Dove to move 60 plus however much damage you moved over, usually being 20, because when you bench a Pokemon with Risky Ruins in play, if it's a basic non-dark Pokemon, place 2 damage counters on it. So that's why there's 2 copies of Risky Ruins and not just 1 copy. I don't want to get greedy. If I prize a Risky Ruins, it's really bad. I need to have access to Risky Ruins. But most importantly, I need to have more stadiums to bump Area 0. So the importance of Area 0 ties into why I play this switch. So essentially, when I realize I'm getting retreat locked, what I do is I play down Area 0, I go wide with my Pokemon, and if they bump the stadium, then I get rid of all the Pokemon on my bench that are susceptible to retreat lock. But most importantly, I also have more outs in my Risky Ruins to bump my own Area 0 on my following turn. So Area 0 is just a way to go wide, gain access to more Pokemon if needed, but most importantly, it just ties into the ability to get rid of your Pokemon. Area 0 is not as much of an offensive stadium, it's more of a defensive stadium. And I think a lot of people don't realize what the purpose of this card is. The same way that decks like Raging Bolt, decks like Slotbox that people are talking about, like that Clefairy Teal Mask, type deck, they use Area 0 defensively and offensively, but we primarily use it defensively. And what I mean by that is they're also going wide, and if you've attacked something and not KO'd it with Phantom Dive, they often play Chen Pao to bump the stadium Area 0 underdepths and get rid of all their liabilities on the bench, anything that's taken damage. We do that, but we can't do it as aggressively, but we're playing it for the same reason from a defensive perspective, whereas that deck is using it offensively as well to generate more damage for a card like Clefairy, while also setting up more 2 prize Pokemon that can be used as an engine, like Teal Mask Overpounce to draw more cards, or Kangaskhan or Latios, etc., etc. So that's why Area 0 is played on this list. Last of all, we have our energy count. We have 3 Psychic, 3 Fire, 2 Dark. Don't play 1 Dark. 1 Dark is a mistake. Even if you're playing 1 Monkey Dory, you just want to get more value out of your Crispins. But also, you want to find the Dark energies more frequently because you have more outs to Monkey Dory than you have to finding your energies. And so you want to maximize your odds of finding the Dark energies. And you just play 3 Psychic and 3 Fire. I'm not playing any special attacker like a Zoomerl or anything like that, so I don't need to play a 4th Psychic. But that's why the split is the way it is. It's just 3 Psychic, 3 Fire. You don't need to play more than that, or else the deck gets really clunky. In energy is also pretty solid. You can find your energies pretty frequently in case you don't want to put Latios in play and you just want to attach retreat a Pokemon in the active to get into Badoo. But that's kind of the reasoning behind the energy count. So that's it for the deck profile. Very long deck profile, but kind of thought I'd share my that I would share my thoughts about this deck and how it is, and I'll go over in a separate video I think matchup guide, and kind of go over how you're supposed to play the cards and when you're supposed to play them in certain matchups. But I think this is a baseline for people to start off and understand why the cards are played in this deck and what the list itself looks like. But yeah, I hope this has been informative, and if anyone has any questions, just feel free to reach out in the comments, or maybe message me personally if you have my contact information. But yeah, that's it for Dragapult Dusknoir. Thanks everyone.